John was just a beacon of light. It's hard to imagine that somebody could spend decades, right, incarcerated for a crime they didn't commit and really just be love personified. You say, how you doing? He's like, I'm blessed like you are. And at the end of every call, he wanted you to know you were loved. And I just think about that. Like, it's a really hard thing for people to say to friends or family or acquaintances that they love them. And John was unabashed that he loved you and you knew you were loved. And so I think it was really important for all of us because when he died, he knew we loved him too.
Hey, what's up, Trish? God bless you and your family and everybody else. To everybody, say happy Thanksgiving. Love y'all. Bye-bye, sis.
John Brown and 3 others are serving life sentences in connection to a 1988 rape, robbery, and murder of an elderly Fordyce woman.
John Brown is actually from Las Vegas, but he had some family members who lived in a small town in Arkansas called Fordyce. And John happened to be spending a summer in Fordyce with some of those family members in 1988. That same summer, there was an assault and murder of a 78-year-old white woman in the town of Fordyce.
One of the important things to know is John Brown and his co-defendants did not know each other. So John knew Tina Jimerson just a little bit, but he had never met Charlie Vaughn or Reginald Early. And so they needed to come up with a way to put them all together. So it was bit by bit that every piece of evidence had really been manufactured just to get a conviction, and that they had essentially just put 4 Black folks together.
The police had sort of gone down a couple of different paths and nothing had really turned out the way they wanted to. And so they end up focusing on Mr. Brown and his co-defendants. The state's case at trial consisted of 2 things. The first is that they relied on the testimony of incentivized informant witnesses. So witnesses that had been convicted of other crimes or had some kind of past history with the police department. And those witnesses testified and gave false testimony against Mr. Brown and his co-defendants in exchange for something that was helpful on their case, some time off their sentences, some special treatment. And then the second thing that the conviction rested on is a false confession. And that came from one of John's co-defendants, a man named Charlie Vaughn.
So Charlie Vaughn is someone who suffers from intellectual disabilities. And while he denied being involved for years, was adamant during every interrogation. At some point, the police, he confesses, and the police take him within 24 hours to the court where he takes a plea agreement. But at the plea agreement, can't give any details about what's happening. Immediately after that plea agreement, Charlie Vaughn recanted and has always said, I didn't do this, and not only that, I don't know these folks, and none of this happened. They had done really rudimentary DNA testing on a sexual assault kit at the time that excluded John Brown and Charlie Vaughn, but included Reginald Early. You know, when we came on to represent John, we knew there was already a confession and that there was already this informant that hadn't been disclosed. But what we didn't know was just sort of how far the corruption continued to go.
In a 26-page document, the judge cites constitutional violations as well as new evidence, including a 2015 co-defendant's confession.
What ended up happening is Tina Jimerson's team at the Center on Wrongful Conviction started doing an investigation. And what they found out was that the state had used an informant. They had driven someone in from Texas and put him in the cell with Charlie Vaughn and said, we need your help. And as he described it, he said, I got them all they wanted and more. And so he talked to Charlie and worked him to get this confession and did it with a recording. He recorded the whole thing and they destroyed it. So it was bit by bit that every piece of evidence had really been manufactured just to get a conviction, and that they had essentially just put 4 Black folks together.
I know I was innocent, but I just couldn't prove it. You know what I'm saying? Because the way they had it stacked on me, I couldn't prove by myself. And I was blessed to have a team of God-fearing attorneys that show the world what the injustice was done to me. But I'm blessed. God's good.
John was released from prison in the fall of 2018 when his conviction was overturned by the U.S. District Court. But there were still some things that had to be worked out until he was fully exonerated because the state chose to appeal the victory that we had that overturned his conviction. And so for 2 years, John was free, but he was living in this limbo with this huge weight on his shoulders of at any moment, the court could decide differently and they could side with the state and he might have to go back into prison.
It was a dream come true. I didn't really go into details with him about how he felt because I was just happy that he was exonerated. I blocked everything else out and I just focused on you out, you're out. It's unfortunate that John did not share his deteriorating condition with me. On a Monday, I got a call from a relative on his father's side that he had died.
In 2020, the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld that opinion and he was fully exonerated. But unfortunately, later that year, he passed away. He died of a heart attack.
So John Brown spent 26 years in the Arkansas Department of Corrections, and most of that time he had largely untreated high blood pressure. John passed away ultimately from congestive heart failure, and that congestive heart failure was caused by years and years and years of untreated high blood pressure while he was incarcerated. So his death was ultimately because of his wrongful conviction.
I'm just really hurt. I'm really hurt that that happens, and shame on them for taking his innocence away from him and not believing him and taking him through all of this drama. It's unfortunate that I have to live for the rest of my life without him, and I'll never get to see him again.
John's case really highlights so many ways in which we need to do better. This didn't happen because there were just some random bad actors. This happened because we as a society choose who we put in power, we elect the people we put in power, and then we have to hold them accountable. And when we don't and bad things happen, it's our responsibility too. This is John's story. And in fact, I shouldn't sit here today telling it. He should be. And no one will get to hear it from him because it was just taken away from him again and again. It's hard to say it feels like justice, right? Everything was taken from him. Every single thing. And even when there was a victory, he lost.
I want people to know my brother's story because it's not just his story. It's so many others that have that same story. Us as a society, we have to be more sensitive to things and not to be biased or prejudiced or racist, because his story could possibly save the next person's life, the next person's family member's life, so that they don't have to endure what my family has had to go through.